of network rail properties. That will require engagement with Network Rail. That engagement has commenced, and the applicant would be required to sign what they call a BAPA, which is, I believe, a Basic Asset Protection application. That is, as you'll be aware, anyone who's worked with Network Rail, they are safety conscious. To the first, and obviously so is the turbine delivery industry. The blade tip itself is elevated at 60 degrees. I can give you the exact heights of that submissions later, written submissions, if that's okay, to give you an idea of the height. I'm afraid I don't have that to hand just now. But you can see within the swept path drawings where the blade itself oversails the railway station. In previous deliveries for Strohnlaird, the blade tip oversailed between the station platform and the station canopy. And during those deliveries, the other platform was used by Network Rail, and we would envisage something similar would happen here in terms of the moving train operations to the other side of the station there. In terms of the oversail elements within Kyle of Localsh, I believe, and if you wish to refer to the route survey report, it shows the extent of oversail. All oversail areas within the swept path drawings are shown hatched in blue. Anywhere that's hatched in red is where the wheels go, but I believe it's mainly over an area of it's a kind of small square and picnic benches, which were well used last night by myself in the wind, but it generally oversails those areas, and I think one building, But I'm sorry, just say any oversail element the applicant would then need to obtain the necessary rights from the property owners or the landowners. Sorry.
Just in terms of the oversail, I think I'd asked in the beginning of the next section for an explanation of the swept path analysis. So perhaps we could do that with reference to the Kyle of Localsh plans for the swept path plans. So in technical appendix 1.7, isn't it? It's 11.1. Yeah.
Would it be helpful if I explain how the swept path drawing is generated?
Both how it's generated and just in terms of the symbols on the drawing as well.
So in terms of creating a swept path model, the very first step that we need to undertake is to understand the vehicle and how the vehicle moves. In that regard, so if we look at the Kyle of Localsh example there, which...
so we have it, yeah.
What we do is we look at the two worst case vehicles. That would be the blade and the worst case tower section, and the reason for that is that the blade's obviously the longest section when it's in the down position, but the tower itself has more axles at the back end generally because of the weight of some of the sections there. So we want to make sure that we cover the worst case kinematic envelope, which is the total area taken as a vehicle moves. When we're building the model, we have reference to the turbine trailers. We have the manufacturer's drawings for those vehicles. So we have the exact dimensions of the axle spacings, the axle heights, the turn angles, everything there. And what we've undertaken then is to then build a complex computer model, which then has all this information in it and can effectively simulate the vehicle when it goes around corners in the affected area. We then add in the component, be it the blade or the tower section there. That's taken from the turbine manufacturer's drawings, and then that is referenced to their transport guidelines to make sure that it's going to be carried exactly the right way. The history that we have with the turbine manufacturers and the haulage industry is that we're able to calibrate these models. So we have undertaken swept paths in the past. We've seen how they move on the ground, and we are very confident in terms of their accuracy there. We've not yet had anything come undone on a route survey at a constraint point. And obtain the background mapping. So the examples that you see there for Carlo-Blacalge is the road network, and the pier is from a topographical survey that was undertaken. So it's a very accurate survey. The sections to the east of the pier are from the Ordnance Survey, just to give better reference points there. We then simulate the vehicle movement through the section, and to assist, because the vehicles provide three different lines in the simulation. Red, the line is where the wheels go, green is the oversail path of the body of the vehicle, and the purple is where the load that is sitting on the vehicle overhangs the body there. You can see those in the drawings there. Because it sometimes gets a bit of a sea of lines, we always produce a separate drawing, which is a summary drawing, which takes the results of the swept path for the blade and the tower and combines it into one set of mitigation works, which is outlined in, I think it's drawing SK01B there, which shows the oversail area of the railway platform. It shows minor oversail coming out of the harbour there, near, which I think is the Coast Guard and Harbour Masters building. Then there is a minor overrun of the footway, and then it heads up to the A87 junction there. And you can see the oversail of the public square in that drawing there. I hope that gives you a rough overview of the process.
That's very helpful. Just that there are three drawings. Can you just explain the purpose of the three drawings?
Certainly. So the first drawing is for the blade, and that's it in its elevated position. So that's drawing SK01. The next drawing is of the tower section, that is SK1A. And then the third drawing, which is a combination of the mitigation works for both loads, is drawing SK1B. SK01B.
The blue hatching is the oversail, and the red hatching is the overrun, which means like you're going off outside the boundary of the road. The wheels of the lorry are going outside the boundary of the road. Is that right?
Yes. So anything red is a load-bearing surface.
One more thing. This model deals with 3 dimensions, does it?
So the assessment considers all dimensions there. In this area, we have sufficient clearance over the bridge. Not the bridge, the railway station there. We have sufficient clearance over the area of public ground coming onto the A87.
What tolerance factors are you applying to this, or are we looking at absolutes? Because the driver's not necessarily going to hit the same turning point every time, is he? So there's got to be some. You've got absolutes for the tower section in width. You have an absolute dimension plus or minus due to manufacturing tolerances of the blade. You've got the measurement of the truck width, but there's no guarantee that your plot is going to be where the truck actually travels. So what allowance are you adding to that, and where is that allowance stated?
So there's a couple of bits there. So in terms of the software has a slight margin built into it in terms of its capabilities. The human driver actually always outperforms the results of the swept path on this. The other one to consider as well, just whilst we're talking about tolerances, is this is based on the worst case turbine. Turbine model may differ from this, and in fact the blade may be slightly shorter than what is illustrated here, and the tower section is slightly smaller. We have to obviously assess a worst case scenario in terms of the tower and turbine components are commercially available at the time of the assessment. So they won't get any bigger than what's there, but they may actually be slightly smaller in that regard. In a constrained section like this, the drivers are exceptionally skilled in their positioning. They will be guided out. It's not just the driver on his own, but he's guided by an escort driver at the back of the vehicle assisting him. And these particularly constrained areas, they will be moving within that swept path area, and they will be making those turns at those specific areas because it is a highly constrained area. So, we are modelling this with good levels of confidence. We've actually moved turbine components in more constrained areas than this, and all the vehicle paths there went exactly as shown on the assessment.
Have you ever experienced turbine blade getting stuck?
No, not on my projects.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to ask, have you ever heard of a turbine blade being stuck?
It would be unfair to my competition. I've not had... I'm struggling to think of one getting stuck in the UK. And I'm struggling to think of one that's got stuck because of a failure to assess.
Mr. Smith. Just for information, on film it didn't get stuck, but one of the blade lifter trailers did strike a lamppost as it was raising when they were going through Hoyk. I don't know if you saw that one. It deflected the street light.
If it would be of assistance, sir, the blade lifter trailer that's being used in that was a first generation vehicle, that's now been withdrawn. So it wasn't mine.
One question I'd like to ask. You've applied certain constraints to this, and it's normal that constraints that have been applied in a drawing are notated in the drawing. I find no notation for any of this on any of the drawings that have been presented. This is, for my world, which is mechanical engineering, this is standard practice.
So, it's standard practice not to provide it on a swept path drawing. If here, we would only provide that if we've been asked by the road authorities, and the road authorities have not requested it.
In that instance, how does anybody assessing this know what vehicle and blade were actually used for the assessment? The document's a legal drawing. It should state its constraints very clearly.
So the document isn't a legal drawing, but if you go to into the report itself, I believe it'll be table 1 or 2. Table 2.1, nearly, sets out the dimensions of the components modelled.
Right, so we've got the dimensions of the candidate turbine in table 2.1, and then over the page, is that a description of the equipment of the carrier?
Yes, in table 2.2, that is at Kyle Lacalch. Currently, the blade trailer that's illustrated there is actually waiting for its police escort at Kyle Lacalch to be picked up. I think that one's from Stronelerg. The next image, which is figure 2.3, is an example blade lifting trailer, and the following figure after that, 2.4, is an example tower trailer.
Do you see that, Mr. Smith?
I can see from components, but you've still got the issues around the vehicle. The vehicle could change. You've got the vehicle that has been used for the drawing has not been stated. I'll make the point as well, if it hasn't been realised, these vehicles have got rear wheel steering as well, so it's not just the front of the vehicle that's being steered. So that's where they can go through some pretty amazing places.
If it helps, sir, we've specified we haven't specified the general trailers that will be used. There are particular models there. The Super WIN carrier trailer that's developed by a company called Notaboom. That is referenced there. There are variations in terms of the blade trailers, the tower trailers, but it's up to the turbine haulier to ensure that the equipment they've used corresponds with the route survey report to make sure that it doesn't stray out with the constraints and mitigation measures that are outlined in the report.
Now, set out some other questions on threat path analysis. The next one is about it's about the requirement to trim back the rock faces on Bry Allen might be a good example. I just wasn't sure from the analysis whether the degree to which rocks are to be trimmed back were shown, but perhaps we could have a look at that.
If it were with assistance, sir, the drawings that you are referencing are in volumes, the route survey report, chapter 11, technical appendix. I'm trying to read the 11.1, and it's in the part 1 of that. I'm talking about the electronic version. But the drawing number, which starts with SK, is SK13, 13A, and 13B.
Yes, that's exactly right. I should have said all of that. Yes.
Would it be of assistance if I just explained what's happening in the drawings?
That would be great help, yeah.
So, as with the other drawings, the first drawing in that set is the blade. Now, in this section here, if I could explain just how the blades would be delivered from port to site. When they come off the ship, they're loaded onto the blade lifting trailer. Now that is a trailer that can elevate the blade up to 60 degrees and gives quite a lot of vertical clearance there. Those would then be transported to Broadford, where they would be then transshipped into what we call a Super WIN carrier, which is more of a kind of conventional but very long trailer. For this project, what we said for a Super WIN carrier trailer is that would be fitted with a scissor lift adapter at the back, and what that allows you to do is through a hydraulic system is you can elevate the blade about 10 meters, depending upon the clearances there at the point of lift there, and coming into this constraint section here, the blade tip would be elevated into the air there to help reduce the need for physical mitigation. So that's the blade drawing. The tower drawing is showing the tower moving through the section there, and then the summary drawing is provided, which is the third drawing there. Where mitigation work is required, the drawing labels there set out the works that are necessary to enable the safe and efficient delivery of the component there. So, for example, there are comments there saying, fence to be removed, vegetation to be cleared, third-party land required. What we've proposed there is to elevate the blade's tip to, reduce the need for any significant intervention works there. We have, and then that goes through all the drawings along the route there. In terms of the comment on the rock face, what we've said there is we haven't provided the exact detail and exact volume to be removed, because obviously this is a candidate turbine. It is not the finalised turbine. So once that decision has been made, these works will be confirmed within the construction traffic management plan for the actual vehicle that's doing, for the actual model of turbine that is being moved, and therefore the detailed design will be based on that, which we hope will be smaller than the envelope illustrated here, with this being a worst case assessment.
Sure, but in terms of the reasonable worst case, in terms of the case that you're studying, how much of the rock would? Because what I see is an oversail, and I've been to the site and I can see a cliff there, but I can't see anything on this drawing which indicates how much, as this, in a worst case, would be removed. Is it a large bit of rock, or is it a small bit of rock?
So the detailed design has not yet been undertaken. That's generally done at the post-determination for all these projects across the country. The extent of those rock modifications are not considered large in terms of their volume of material.
So,
That's right. I would have expected that there would have been a cut-through section of that area showing the rock wall and the potential of what the blade was going to cut into, and I would have expected dimensions. Because ultimately this is what you're going to have to do in order to request any actions taken on the rock face. So I don't see why that's not presented up front. There are no physical dimensions stated on any of the swept path drawings relating to issues of additional road surfaces or rock removal. And in the engineering world, this would be extremely strange because you have everything tied down with tolerances. It's just not there with these drawings.
Sir?
So the route survey report here is entirely standard for this type of development across the United Kingdom. These detailed design matters are dealt with post-determination when the exact turbine model is determined, and they are designed there in full consultation with the road authorities. We also note that neither Highland Council or Transport Scotland has made any adverse comment on the level of details presented within the route survey report, and they are the relevant road and authorities for the study area here.
So just to go into this point a bit further, this is an environmental impact assessment that we're looking at. I don't understand that ministers would be granting consent for works to the edge of the road. Well, Mr. Campbell's looking at me. Perhaps they are granting consent.
I'm not saying anything.
So I wonder, and this works to the side of the road, I think would be subject of further consent by the Roads Authority, would they not?
Yes, I think so. For the A87, I believe it's Transport Scotland. But we're also impinging into visual amenity here, because if you take the Kinloch bends, when you have these two rock faces either side, this is very much a tourist attraction. And if you start hacking that about, you're going to be changing what is very distinct in people's memories about Skye. I believe that there should be much higher definition in this area before any decisions are made, and I'm surprised the planners didn't ask for it.
If I may, sir, in terms of any modifications to the road network, they would obviously have to go through, in terms of the Highland Council network, either a section 184 or, sorry, that's the English version. They would go through, I'm doing one down south, they would go through a road opening permit or road construction consent through the technical approval process there. Modifications to the trunk road network are subject to a letter of understanding and a minute of agreement between the developer and Transport Scotland as a trunk road authority there. So there's a full technical approval process, and those matters would need to be referenced and contained within the construction traffic management plan in the abnormal load section there. And that also gives you the opportunity to, again, for the council to consider and review.
And since Kinloch Hindhurst has been raised, perhaps you should look at that and check whether you're predicting rock removal at Kinloch Hindhurst. I have that as drawings SK10, SK10A and SK10B. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, in terms of that drawing, if you refer to drawing SK10B, again, the oversail areas are very small, where we've said there's minimal clearances on the drawings there. So we're not anticipating, and again, the blade tip will be elevated in the super wing carrier trailer to reduce the works there. But again, as with other areas, that will be subject to detailed design and the approval of the road authorities through that discharge of the CTMP and the technical approval process.
The drawing's got minimal clearance to the rock faces here. I would suggest that means that some action will be taken because just lifting the blade isn't going to be sufficient. So I believe more definition and a vertical definition is required to be clear on that matter.
So the relevant word there is clearance. It does clear, it's just minimal clearance. It's not coming into conflict.
We'll move on from that point. I think I have parties' positions on that. Next question is, how long are road alterations necessary for abnormal load movement likely to take, and what impact on traffic are they likely to have? Mr. Buchan.
Thank you, sir. It really depends on the scale of the mitigation works. So, to give you an example, where last week undertook works to enable deliveries for Crystal Rig 4 wind farm. That was creation of a load-bearing surface, removal of street furniture at Old Craighall roundabout to the east of Edinburgh at the junction of A720A1. Those works were undertaken at night, and they were complete within 3 days. So that is the provision of a load-bearing surface. That load-bearing surface was in Grasscrete, so that it can then merge back into, over time, into the becomes similar in appearance to the current grass verge. The electrical connections for street lighting columns were disconnected. Socket foundations were provided for items such as road signs and other barriers, so that when the load comes along, a traffic management team in front can take these out of the ground. The load then goes through, they get put back into the ground, and then continues there. So those works were undertaken over 3 nights. It really depends on the scale and the size, so I can't give you a definitive for each one. What I can suggest is that those works because they're going to be well known in advance when the turbines are coming, they can be staggered to appropriate times on the network to make sure that the impact of those is minimised. They would have to be probably undertaken under traffic signal control for the safety of all road users and those undertaking the works, but they're not large, significant scale works. As you can see throughout the report, it's minor interventions here and there, rather than whole-scale reconstruction.
Is Crystal Rig comparable to this proposed development in terms of the works that might be required?
It was a helpful recent example that should you find yourself in the east of Edinburgh, you could look at. It's a slightly smaller blade, but it's doing an incredibly sharp right-hand turn, going underneath the A1 overbridge at the roundabout and having to thread its way past with minimal clearance to the traffic light poles that control the roundabout, which we were not able to move or alter there.
And what was the scale of traffic disruption during those works?
I didn't receive any complaints, so minimal.
So traffic was flowing while those works were going on?
Yes, and they were undertaken in the evening and at night, pre-arranged to, and in fact were undertaken with other works that Transport Scotland were undertaking in the network to try and reduce the impact of disruption on other road users as well.
The situation here is slightly different. We have, I assume we were talking about something fairly flat there. At the Loch bends, the Sleachan junction, and the dry knot curves, as I listed in my write-up for this. We've got crash barriers immediately adjacent to the road, and there are steep drops away from those crash barriers. Because there are no dimensions on the swept path drawings, it's not clear just how much space is wanted for clearance. You may need to add material to increase the width of the road in all of these situations, and if it's a heavy load-bearing surface where a lot of weight is going to go onto it, you may need to pile it before you put additional material in. There are water courses going underneath these bends as well. At the Sleachan junction, the extra land required is on the inside of the curve. This is immediately adjacent to the foundations of the bridge, so any additional material that needs to be put in would possibly need piling. That's going to take some very serious looking at next to a bridge foundation. And again, at that point, there is a request to take away the bridge railings. And there's a pretty substantial river there. And there's about a 3-metre drop from the barrier down to that river.
Perhaps we could look at the Sleachan plans then, which are next one on from Kinlochine, or
SK11A.
SK11, yeah. Do you want to respond to that with reference to the Sleachan plans?
Yes, certainly. So the blue hatched areas of oversail, so there's no load-bearing elements on that. The red areas are areas where there would be a load-bearing surface provided. Having worked on 600 odd wind farms, we've never yet had to provide piling on any of those across the United Kingdom, Scandinavia or the Baltics as yet. But obviously there will be a full investigation undertaken to satisfy the road authorities of any minor modifications to the road network there in terms of the load-bearing elements of it. In terms of barriers and other elements there, we would look at engaging with the road authorities there to look at a socketed solution where we convert the foundation for the barrier or the item of street furniture so it can be then, prior to the loads arriving, they're removed, the load moves through, they're then put straight back in to ensure the safety of all road users using the network there. In terms of the bridge elements there, we're not undertaking any load-bearing works close or within proximity to the bridge itself. It's oversail.
Remember your microphone, Mr. Smith.
In that regard, we believe it's suitably located away from the foundations of the structure, but obviously, again, through the detailed design with the road authorities, and given that's a trunk road junction as well, then that will be subject to a minute of agreement and full detailed design pack agreed with both the Highland Council in this regard and Transport Scotland, because it's the intersection of both road networks.
If that had been assessed correctly, as is stated, and were proper drawings, I believe that should have been provided to the Highland Council in the planning submission. I think it's of too great importance to be left to the end, because it is the difference between this being viable or not viable in terms of the roads to deliver this project, or one of the areas. Yeah. So the point has just been made that there is only one road on Skye. If anything occurs, all the communities on Skye are in deep trouble, and it has to be fixed within hours, not within days. And in terms of roadworks here, we've seen a lot of roadworks recently. Quite often we see lanes shut for a good 3 weeks before everything gets cleared up. So you might get fast reactions in cities, but you tend not to get fast reactions around here.
So, do you want to respond to that, Mr. Vaughan?
Thank you, sir. It has been assessed correctly. In terms of roadworks, I can't obviously comment on the roadworks undertaken by the public sector, but the private sector generally gets works undertaken quicker. These are focused works that will be undertaken. They'll be undertaken with a minimal amount of disruption as humanly possible, but also state that these works have been undertaken on similar types of road network across Scotland in communities in rural Scotland where there are a limited number of road opportunities for people to take, and they've been undertaken successfully and without causing significant degrees of hardship and disruption.
But you wouldn't anticipate blocking the road to carry out these works?
No.
I disagree, especially at Sleacombe. If there's any modifications needed to the road, at least one lane will have to be shut. And that is standard practice here because the roads are so narrow and so restricted.
I certainly agree, one lane, but not the whole road.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. The impact of shutting one lane here, it is astounding how quickly you end up with a massive traffic jam, especially in the mid-season.
And just on that, that's why we'd want to make sure that any such works are undertaken well in advance and at the appropriate time to minimise disruption.
And I suppose the question is how long would works such as those at Sleacombe take?
It depends upon when Transport Scotland and Highland Council would allow the works to be undertaken. If they were to be undertaken out with the network peaks and predominantly at night, I would think there would be a restriction there for maybe 5 days, maybe slightly longer. It really depends on what the licence for undertaking the works is from the road authority, so I couldn't give you any degree of certainty on that.
We've been struggling on the island for resource for roadworks. We're very limited for crews for doing roadworks, both for the trunk road, which is managed by BAE Scotland, and by the other A roads, which is Highland Council. Our experiences here are that unless you brought somebody in from completely outside, there would not be road crews available on a quick basis to do these jobs. we really do wait a long time for things here because resources that are supplied to us are so small.
Sir, we would not have access to Bear Scotland or the Highland Council staff for undertaking these works, so it would be a private firm that would come in under licence and under their supervision to undertake the works at the developer's expense.
I get the impression people are flagging a bit, so I'll take a pause after this section, if that's okay. I don't think there's anything more on unless you want to come back on that. I think I understand the position of parties on this.
I think we covered things further in your other questions later on.
I think we've covered the Slacken and Kinloch Einhorst question. Well, I suppose we haven't covered the anywhere else. Does anywhere else require significant engineering works? We've discussed, having discussed the ones. School Junction. Yeah.
But there are various works throughout the report. But again, they're quite localised to individual areas.
The junction in Portree, the traffic lighted junction just down the road by the school, that junction was changed last year and it became a traffic lighted junction. The swept path analysis drawings don't reflect the current situation. The original swept path analysis drawings requested the removal of a road island which separated the traffic turning left and the traffic going straight on. In the process of going to traffic lights, that was removed, but it's unclear whether that is enough road surface for what was requested. But there is now an absolute forest of traffic lights, pedestrian crossings and posts there. At the high school, this is. So that would be drawing SK11A.
If the drawings change.
Sorry, I've got the wrong one. It's SK34A and B.
Got that. Do you want to respond, Mr. Pine?
Thank you, sir. In terms of the works there, this sometimes happens between the production of the reports and obviously when we get to determination, things can change. Excuse me. That type of work would then be caught up within the construction traffic management plan, which would include the revised and updated abnormal loads survey and mitigation schedule. So that would deal with those matters there. In terms of the street lighting, and forgive me, I failed to look at the lighting provision in detail, but generally new traffic signals, when they're provided nowadays, they're provided in what's called an owl socket, which is a square box that the traffic lighting column sits in, traffic signal column sits in. That allows for easy replacement. If there was an accident and something hit it, it can be pulled out without affecting the electronics underneath. What we would look at doing there is very similar. If those weren't in a socketed foundation, they'll be converted to a socket foundation. So in the immediate advance of the turbine convoy arriving, the traffic management firm would then remove those. The convoy would go through, they'd be put back in place, and then the junction would operate as it currently does just now.
I think just one final point I'd like to make. There were two options for the routes made. The Slacken junction wouldn't need to be modified, and the dry knot curves would not need to be modified if one option wasn't used. So there's no specific suggestion of which was the favoured option, which is rather confusing.
don't know if you need to comment on that, or I think that's noted.
I was merely going to say, so there are two options provided. The applicant has considered two options that they consider viable to get to the site.
I've asked about the degree of visual impact, but I think we've covered the amount of works that are required. Is anything more needing to be said about visual impact? And I think we've covered the question of load-bearing widening works, considered a detailed design phase, or have we?
I think we've taken that as far as we can.
And the last question was about pedestrian safety, the implications for pedestrian safety or safety of other road users, of movement of signage and barriers and so on. Is there any implication?
All I was going to say, sir, is that in advance of the convoy there will be a traffic management team to remove socketed items, and then after the convoy's been through they'll be put back in place. That would ensure the safety of other road users, so we're not leaving barriers out of the ground or signs missing. Those elements would be removed, the load goes through, they're replaced, those people would stay on hand. So for example, down the road near the high school, if deliveries were made during the day and during the school day, the traffic management team would be there to ensure pedestrian safety as the load goes around that corner.
Right. I said we would take a break. Unless you want to come back on this?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
So we'll take a break to 3 rather, which leaves us with 55 minutes to complete the hearing. We do need to leave sharply at 4, so we'll need to get moving. I have just a couple of things to mention. I have received the conditions, so thank you for that. And Ms. Semler will come to your points. Ms. Salt, if you want to come in at any point, do. I'm sorry, I haven't been looking at you, but if you want to come in.
That's fine. A lot of the information that was sent to you was relating to community concerns, and I feel that there are members here from our side who have much more expert information than we've been able to pull from the Community Council, limited on the kind of resources that we have. Okay.
Okay, so we're on section 4, the method for moving abnormal loads. And the first point is about movement of loads at night, which the applicants propose to do that, or suggest that can be done. So I've put a number of points under that. I think we can probably take the first 2 points together. So the first 2 points are what difficulties, if any, are involved in movement at night. And second, does the standard or condition of Sky's roads, particularly the A863 and A850, present any particular difficulty to moving loads at night? Mr. Buchan.
Thank you, sir. Night movements for abnormal load deliveries can be undertaken either within the hours of darkness or within the twilight hours on that, and we've seen that occurring more and more across Scotland. And for example, deliveries undertaken recently to South Carlwyn Farm to the southeast of Ayr on the A713, which is a road with a number of significant bends and constrained sections, especially to the south of the town of Dalmellington, have all been accomplished at night and not during the day. I would say that I think the principal difficulty is the availability of the police resource to escort the load, and we would seek to overcome that by early engagement with Police Scotland and set out our proposed plans and measures there with them. diminished levels of light can be mitigated if in the absolute hours of darkness, and what they call it curtain lighting along the body level of the vehicle can be illuminated from the load bed down to help illustrate where the wheels are in relation to the road edge. In terms of Sky's road network, I don't believe there's anything particularly different in terms of other sites that have been delivered in comparison to Sky's road network. What I would say is that should there be any significant road defects, potholing, etc., we would obviously look for those to be repaired prior to deliveries commencing.
I think the one comment there is on the A863 and the A850. There's been a lot of resurfacing happening recently, so they are improving. But we still have an issue with the markings on these roads. There's quite often no central white lining and no edge lining. And obviously that's not a stopper for an IAL, but I'm sure the drivers would prefer to see where the edge of the road is.
Is that a difficulty? Is that a difficulty, Mr. Bracken?
Not necessarily so, no. I mean, if they have the illumination from the road bed down, you can clearly see the road edge. Obviously, having a line there would be advantageous, but it's not essential. If you look at the NC 500 route for deliveries that have recently been undertaken for Limekiln Wind Farm, there's not really a road marking down along the edge of that for large sections of that road either, and there are particularly twisty sections on that as well at certain sections.
Just one other point. We've got no road lighting at all on those two roads. So in the winter, it is very, very black, and you have to concentrate very hard just driving a car.
I think you've commented on the lighting. The third point there is, should there be a worst case assessment in which abnormal loads can't be moved at night? What would the implications be of moving them in daytime?
In terms of moving during the day, again, the main implication there would be agreeing with Police Scotland a suitable time that avoided sensitive times throughout the day, such as school drop-off, pick-up times along the route, so that we could engage with the police and find a suitable time that reduces the potential for disruption to other road users.
Perhaps before you answer that, respond to that, Mr. Smith, perhaps we can take that together with the next point, which is how would abnormal loads be moved while maintaining other traffic flow? You described that briefly in your evidence. If you want to describe it a bit further, just explain how the movement of AIL would work while maintaining traffic flow.
Certainly, thank you. In terms of the abnormal loads, the blades, the tower sections themselves are, the abnormal load classifications are a minefield of different parts of legislation, but those tower sections, blade sections, all by law require an escort by the police on that. So the police would generally be in the front of the convoy with up to two, well, sometimes three, but between 2 and 3 vehicles. One lead police vehicle is always at the start of the convoy. You then have the vehicles themselves interspersed with a civilian escort driver who is assisting the abnormal load driver with instructions, directions to help with the rear wheel steering to get around the obstruction. The police lead escort generally goes in advance of the convoy to ask members of the public, at a particular, for example, at a very tight bend, to wait prior to that section so that the abnormal load vehicle going around a very tight corner has access to both lanes there. The police are the only people by law that can stop a member of the public and ask them just to wait. those sections are generally defined by the police and their pre-planning, so they look for areas where the road width is suitable, where there's lay-bys, where there's junction bell mouths, and what have you, so that they've got a plan in terms of their convoy movement of where people can be held to protect all other road users. At the back of the convoy, after the last AIL vehicle, there's another civilian escort, and then there's a rear police escort, just to make sure that no one decides to try and overtake, as they will find themselves in a rather awkward predicament on that. One thing I think is helpful is that the loads, when they are coming with opposing traffic, where they've been held by the police for a short period to allow them to go past, is the load itself can oversail the verge, so that it's not just the whole load on the road at any one time. There will be the opportunity to allow people to get past, and under police direction and police direction only, traffic that is trailing the convoy can be released to go around it as well, to help minimise disruption wherever possible. All those works are undertaken by specialist officers of Police Scotland who are trained in this, and it is a process that has been used across the United Kingdom and in particular in Scotland, so the officers are very well versed in that type of operation, and also operating in the Highlands, because there's obviously been quite a number of recent projects, so they can hone their skills and learn from those experiences.
Smith, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, the road width on the 863 and the 850 barely reaches 6 metres. You can drive down there and you can see one truck heading towards another truck, and they can barely miss each other. If you add a turbine section to one of those trucks, even if the turbine section was overhanging the verge, they would strike. The issue we have, and would like to raise and raised in our submission, we don't believe there's enough spaces on Skye's roads to allow for the police escort just to stop and move people over. There isn't the space to move over. And quite often you'll find that there's damage to the edge of the road, and it's very easy to damage tyres, wheels and suspension here. One of the reasons we believe there should have been a traffic plan up front is that we can't see how the convoy will get past large amounts of oncoming traffic, especially other HGVs, and specifically in a situation where you have long sections of curves, there's going to be something like 30 convoys for the turbines required for Aketil. Rather than just randomly deal with the situation for each convoy, which would happen with the police escort, surely it would be safer to think about having traffic controlled sections where it's very clear that oncoming traffic can't get past. It's quite a nasty shock to find a policeman sitting in front of you that you weren't expecting, because I've had it happen with an AIL in Scotland, and it causes confusion. People get confused enough on our roads here when they're driving around on their holidays, and we've also got a lot of foreign registered traffic here as well. And I know that happens elsewhere in Scotland, but the driving here can be very erratic, as you've probably already found yourselves.
So, in terms of wide vehicles, a Winnebago, maybe about 2 point, well, I don't know how wide it is, but it's pretty wide.
They need to be below 2.9 or they become an abnormal load, sir. We face the same commentary or concerns for Limekill Wind Farm on the north coast, the one that goes west from Thurso. I always get its number mixed. I think 863, I think, from memory. There you go. Thank you. Oncoming traffic and training traffic was accommodated there. We have the same issues for stone leg deliveries. Again, the widths were similar, not quite exactly the same, but again, those were accommodated there. With working with the police and developing the construction traffic management plan early doors, and getting that approved by everyone post-determination through the discharge of plan conditions is the standard route for undertaking that, and is the route that both the Highland Council and Transport Scotland have deemed suitable for this project.
One thing that's different here is Scotland is supposedly the second highest or largest tourist attraction in Scotland after Edinburgh. Skye, sorry, I'm getting confused. The levels of traffic we see here during the daytime with tourists sometimes is totally amazing. And I think it's going to cause a lot more trouble trying to keep people out of the way and move people out of the way. If it would be possible to have a more controlled system, I think it would make more sense. I think it would keep people safer. And I think the safety issue is the thing that has to come first.
Seriously say so. I think if you had sections under traffic light control, which I think is what Mr. Smith is referring to, and people don't see any work there, they don't see any roadworks, they don't see any police or vehicle there, then there's a propensity for people to be, as Mr. Smith has alluded to, some people take more erratic decisions, and actually you could be creating more of a road safety issue there, where people think, well, it's obviously a light that's doing nothing, and try and jump it. And then will find themselves on the wrong end of a police car. I think it's the methodology has been tried, it's been tested, it's been proven to be safe, and it helps minimise disruption. And we don't see any reason why it wouldn't be safe here either. And early engagement and planning with the specialised officers in Police Scotland will help ensure that we can minimise disruption as far as possible. And keep the public safe.
I think signposting is very important, especially large electric signposts. We do get a lot of blockages here. You've probably noticed the small bridge parapet, brick or stone protections. They get hit regularly. We get traffic lights shutting those off regularly, and we don't get people jumping them. So if you have traffic light control plus reasonable signage, I think it's possible.
I think, that kind of level of detail is something perhaps that can be dealt with in a traffic management plan. I think it's been assessed on the basis that the police would control it. I think if the traffic management plan would be dealt with under a condition, if that didn't appear to be the way that it could be done, then it would come back. It would be a matter for consent under a condition of the wind farm permission. So I think I have both parties' positions on this. And the other issue that's been raised is the impact of breakdown. How likely is it that a breakdown might occur, and how much delay might a breakdown cause to other traffic?
Thank you, sir. Abnormal load breakdowns are very rare, and I was racking my brains. I couldn't think of one in the last 5 years. Doesn't mean that one has happened out there. I'm just not aware of any happening. But in terms of an abnormal load breaking down and a spotted abnormal load breaking down, there are a couple of things to consider. First of all, we have a transport management plan that will involve a section specifically on a contingency plan of what happens if you don't get that for Tesco deliveries or forestry movements around the network. There will be round about 3 civilian escort vehicles with each convoy. They'll hold tools, tyre repair equipment, a whole range of other elements. We will also have the traffic management consultant company with the load to help manage that. We've got the police in attendance already. So, the vehicles themselves are highly specialist. They're checked over every day. They've got a very strenuous maintenance regime. And if the very worst happens, generally on projects that are more remote areas, there's always a spare tractor unit brought up just in case of, a vehicle being taken out for maintenance or service. So in those regards, a breakdown, I would argue, is very rare, but in the likely event of something occurring, there's a whole range of resources that are already there with the convoy to ensure that the safe movement of the traffic around a breakdown can be accommodated, and hopefully reduce the any level of disruption there, far more so than perhaps people moving static caravans or other such loads.
But standing your point, I understand your point about the difficulty of getting past the abnormal load. Is there anything else you want to raise on that, Mr. Smith?
Just going back to the last point that was being made about the traffic, a breakdown. What we're concerned with, because of only having this one road system, and it supplies all the communities on Skye, is a catastrophic failure. In other words, if for some reason we had a section of road collapse due to load and it caused a rollover of a vehicle so that the vehicle is on its side, we cannot have a situation where the island's road is taken out of usage for days. There has to be equipment within drivable distance, so for instance cranes and this sort of thing, that can actually resolve the situation. Otherwise the community here could be, or the communities here could be put at severe risk, because we'd run out of fuel very quickly.
Mr. Backen?
Thank you, sir. In terms of a catastrophic event, prior to any abnormal load moving, there is a weight consultation undertaken with the statutory authorities, so with the Highland Council, Transport Scotland, Network Rail, all structural owners along the route. So the route is then re-reviewed before any movement happens in terms of its load bearing or weight carrying capability. So that removes that. If there was an incident where a vehicle left the road, in terms of crane accessibility as well, we have two at the port for discharging the vessels, and we will also have cranes on site that could affect a recovery if, in the highly unlikely event that were to happen.
May I raise a question with you, and that is that at no point in any of this discussion has anybody explained how long it's going to take for one of these things to move from the airfield at Broadford or Ashake to the site. Because I think I've heard you won't be getting past it, irrespective of whether you're going down the road or up it. So how long is the road going to effectively be shut for?
I don't know if we did deal with the speed earlier, and I think we referred to the police and Mr. Buchan's statement. But if you want to go back to that and just cover that point, Mr. Buchan.
Thank you, sir. Table 2, Mr. Semler, of my statement, which is, do you have access to that? Oh, sorry. So there's a table there that sets out the journey time for a convoy using both access options there. It's broken down into individual sections there. So from Broadfords to Slugachan, we'll be looking at 40 minutes. From Slugachan to the A50 junction, 26 minutes rounding up. The Slugachan to the southern access, going around the west, 37 minutes. And for the eastern access coming into the north, a further 22 minutes. And just to restate, it's not a road closure. It would be a rolling process of asking people just to allow the convoy past under full specialist police officer control.
And you're stating in your evidence that from Broadford Aerodrome, the AILs would move at 30 miles an hour?
On average.
Sorry, just an anecdotal experience. I was driving down the island, and on the longest, straightest bit of road on this island, there was a single AIL coming the opposite direction, and I was forced to stop off the road to let this thing go through, and it was just a small turbine central section coming up the road. And there's no risk passing these things, so I think we're all living in cloud cookie land. I'll shut up now.
Can I make a point? I did state in my submission that driving off the road here was totally unacceptable, because you've probably seen there are deep gullies in places where we've got poor surface drainage and the edge of the road can be washed away. Yeah. If I would not leave the road, even with a policeman there, because you are going to do damage. And that's with my background experience as a design engineer in the automotive industry. I think this has got to be rethought. You can't expect people to drive off the road, especially when they're roads they're not used to. There will be accidents or rollovers if people do that, because they simply can't predict the state of the verge if they drive onto it. So we've got to think of something better than that.
Are you suggesting people should drive off the road, Mr. Buchan?
No.
But as you've heard, the evidence, and I've seen it myself, is that people, they do attempt to push people off the road.
I don't think we can take the point further. I've heard both parties. I think this is partly covered. Just moving on to the next point, what impact would the movement of abnormal loads likely to have? The first point is on the road fabric. And my question is about the axle weight of vehicles compared with other vehicles on the roads. That's perhaps the first point.
Thank you, sir. So the maximum legal axle load for a non-abnormal load vehicle is 10 tonnes. The highest axle load for the proposed abnormal loads is 12 tonnes, depending upon the component carried and the exact model of that turbine. The higher axle loads are generally associated with the tower sections, the hub, which is the section that the blades fit onto, the drivetrain, which includes the gearbox and the generator, and then the cell, which is the box that encompasses all those components at the top of the tower. So they're the ones with the higher axle loads, and generally the higher axle loads occur on the two rear axles of the tractor unit rather than the trailer themselves, because obviously you want a greater tractive weight over the drive wheels there. It doesn't apply to every single axle going down the vehicle on that. The other point just to make as well is that the higher axle is only obviously apply to the loaded vehicles, not the vehicles coming back empty on that. So in terms of the potential for an adverse effect on the fabric of the road network, I believe that's minimised. The damage that you tend to get from HGV movements, fast-moving, multiple repeat axles going like bang, 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 over a repeated period at a higher speed. These vehicles won't be doing that higher speed because they're limited, and B, they've got the police on either end of them, so it's a controlled process. It's not vehicles, and you will get one convoy per day rather than the repeated shock that you get with more standard HGV damage that you would normally see on a road network.
So what's the degree of additional wear and tear?
I would say for the abnormal loads, minimal.
Agreed, I wouldn't contest that, because because of the number of axles that are applied, it's not much difference to an HGV load.
I'll skip over the next question then, which relates to dealing with wear and tear. The next question was about the Skye Bridge in the A87 being the sole means of access to Skye from the mainland for most ordinary traffic. What degree of impact would the movement to abnormal loads be likely to have on access using those roads, in particular residents' access to services in shops in Kyle and Broadford, Portree, on emergency vehicles and on deliveries, especially deliveries of perishable goods?
Thank you, sir. Again, it comes down to timing. We would like to avoid any impacts with peak periods of the road network, school pick-up drop-off periods, interfering with lifeline ferry services, that type of thing. So we obviously work closely with the police in minimising those time periods. In terms of emergency vehicle access, I'm not aware of any incidents where an emergency vehicle was delayed by an abnormal load movement. There is a communication protocol because of the police control of the convoy. They're alerted to any blue light emergency issue as it develops, and will ensure that emergency vehicles can get past and have priority. You mentioned deliveries of perishable goods. I don't believe there will be a noticeable effect on those movements. Abnormal load deliveries for Stone Leg Wind Farm, for example, travel from Calville Calves to Broadford, and then from Broadford to a site just to the south east of Fort Augustus, and that's circa 67 miles. I was not aware of any, I double-checked, of any news sources reporting any significant concerns expressed by purveyors of perishable goods on the 87 during that time, so I don't foresee any particular issue with that here. Forgive me, was that all the points that you'd asked?
I think that covers it, yeah.
Thank you.
Standing your disagreement about vehicles being able to pass each other, is there anything else you'd like to raise on that?
Because of that statement, I feel that as part of the traffic plan, it should be looked at to see if additional lay-bys can be provided, because you've probably noticed we've got very few lay-bys along this road. So there are very few places to actually wave somebody off, or for somebody to find that extra piece of width. And quite often when there are some places to pull off, they're not even hard standing. They're quite often grassy areas.
Is that something that might be looked at in a traffic management plan?
Not normally, and would note that the Highland Council nor Transport Scotland have requested that level of infrastructure.
Can I come back on that? We're not talking about much longer convoys. If you had 3 76-metre blades, it's a bit different to 3 35-metre blades and the turbines that are there now. So you've got a much longer convoy of vehicles to actually avoid. So if you needed to get an emergency vehicle around those, for instance, you need a decent parking up place to allow them to get past.
Is it conceivable it would be looked at under a traffic management plan?
There was once proposals in Wales for strategic lay-bys to be provided. The difficulty with that, and for ambulance use, was one of the suggestions there, was, well, how do you know where the ambulance is going to occur on the road network? So the actual lay-bys were used once only, and subsequent deliveries of abnormal loads have occurred without use of those facilities ever again.
It might be appropriate to look at that in terms of what sections of road have specifically a lot of curves. If it's a curvy section of road, it becomes more difficult to pass because the trucks are going to be moving more to the middle of the road. In those situations, it's going to take longer to clear out the way. So maybe the lay-bys you should be looking for or after those sections. So you can either stop oncoming traffic or you can stop a convoy.
I think I have parties' positions on this. The next question is about impacts on pedestrian safety from movement of abnormal loads. Is there an impact, for instance, at Esavratan?
So as we've mentioned previously, there is the traffic management contractor ahead of the convoy that would be removing any street furniture out of the way and asking pedestrians just to hang back from the oversail areas as the load goes through. As soon as the load's gone through, the safety barriers or street furniture road signs can be replaced, and so in effect there would be no adverse safety impact on pedestrians at those locations. Ryan Schools would obviously try and avoid, with the police's cooperation, going through school pick-up drop-off times.
I think I worry about the guys picking up signs and things like this. There are a limited number of people. You can get very big crowds on those curves and at the Sleacken Junction. I think something more is required than that. I think you might need signposting to give people plenty of warning and tell them just what's happening. You're talking about tourists who are not British nationals. They may not understand some of the signals. I think you'd have to be quite specific, and you may need to fence off certain areas to stop access.
I'm not sure if you've done that part of the trip of one of your inspections, but it is quite striking. It's quite striking to a visitor how many people mill around at Sleacken.
So then, as part of a general construction traffic management plan, you generally have pedestrian signage advising people there may be abnormal loads operating in the area. If it is of assistance, those can be in different languages as well, if that would help. And we can obviously discuss that with the road authorities at that time.
Okay. The next question I think we've covered, which was about emergency vehicles.
Could I just take us back to table 2 for a minute? I don't want to go over old ground, but when we asked about journey times, in table 2, the applicant calculates it's going to take 30 minutes to drive from Broadford Airport. Well, Broadford Airport is actually in Ashake, on the east side of Broadford. The speed limit through Broadford is 20 miles an hour, and yet the applicant talks about driving through at 30 miles an hour with an abnormal load. And the same with Portree. So the A87, A850 junction, they talk about the speed limit being 30, the vehicles travelling at 30 miles an hour. Again, you're at a 20 mile an hour speed limit at that stage. And residents of Ashake report that it takes at least 40 minutes to drive from Ashake to Sleacken in a normal car. So I would suggest that in table 2, the figures that are presented here are wild underestimates. You'd have to be breaking the speed limit in Portree and in Broadford for starters with an abnormal load trailer.
Average speed, sir. For the whole section.
You're suggesting that these abnormal load trailers carrying 76 metre long blades are going to travel faster than 30 miles an hour?
So we have provided indicative details there based on average speeds.
I've made my point.
One point I'd like to make about the police escort. Obviously, things are going to slow up and speed down while the police escort is moving backwards and forwards and controlling things. You would get a better flow with the traffic light system, but that added unknown of the police having to stop things and maybe traffic have to stop, convoy has to stop, that all changes the actual transit time. So the transit time is somewhat uncertain.
Is that taken into account in your transit times?
So within the construction traffic management plan, then there will be a fully detailed journey time estimate in full consultation with the police after they've undertaken their review and have consulted with all the relevant authorities, and reviewed the route in detail, and that's the most appropriate place for that information to be provided there. This was an attempt to provide some indication for this, but obviously the more detailed provision would be within the approved CTMP.
No further comment.
So can we talk about, and this is Mr. Sembler, we've been waiting patiently, I think this is your point. Mr. Buchan's evidence is that even with construction traffic, this is the adequacy of the traffic survey data, even with construction traffic, the amount of traffic on the A87, A850 and A863 would remain within design capacity of the roads, and that's in section 487 of his hearing statement. I'd put down 2 points, but obviously people can raise other points about that. So the first point was, will cumulative traffic on the road remain with the design capacity of those roads in the scenarios examined in Chapter 11 of the EIRR, which is shown in Table 11.19. And the second is, what remaining, well, that was a second point to allow other people to raise other points on the traffic survey data. So perhaps you could deal with that question first. If we have a look at the table in 11.19 of the EAR. So we're seeing cumulative traffic increasing by 445 HGVs from 3,554 to between the on the A87 to the A863 and B883. Is that still within the capacity of the road?
So yes, it is. The link capacity of the roads can be established through a variety of different methods. However, if you were to use the NESA manual, which was formerly part of the design manual for roads and bridges and deals specifically with Scottish roads and allows for variations in road widths and different types of roads, the theoretical road capacity over a 12-hour period for the A850 is 19,200 vehicles, for the A863 it's 19,200 vehicles, and for the A87 it is circa 21,600 vehicles over that 12-hour period. That's the ultimate capacity of those roads. There, as you can see, the highest level of traffic in the 24-hour period is 7,850. So the road link capacity would not be exceeded. That's a point that is acknowledged by Transport Scotland and the Highland Council as the relevant road authorities who have not objected to the scheme on its cumulative impact.
I'm sorry, I think I got the total traffic wrong. Yeah, no, so the cumulative total, highest cumulative total is 7,850, yeah. On that table, Mr. Semler, you had a concern about the baseline data. Do you want to raise that now?
The issues I had with baseline data was that when I obtained from Traffic Scotland the raw traffic data for the reporting points on the road, 30% of it between 2000 and 2020 didn't exist. So any data that you're looking at is a work of calculation. Sorry, can you hear me now? The traffic data that I obtained from Traffic Scotland for, and this is the raw data, for all the reporting points on the A87, showed that 30% of it was missing. So anything that you're actually looking at has been created Now, I don't know what the basis for the formulas that create the traffic flows on these bits of road are. What I can tell you is that the data I have is so incomplete as to almost be meaningless in several cases. So I don't know how anybody's come to a conclusion about it. The other point I'd make about
So before you move on, what do you mean by missing?
Doesn't exist. What happened is they got loops in the road, and the loops have failed, no one's fixed them, so there's no data. Literally no data, 1/3 of it, over 20 years. And when you look at what data there is and do all sorts of extrapolations, the growth that existed on this island between 2010 and 2020 is immense. Well, not 2020, 2019. Of course, it all fell to pieces over COVID, and what the recovery after COVID looks like, I don't know, because I haven't seen the data for it. But when I looked at doing a straight extrapolation from the previous growth path, it was substantially more than any number I've seen in any of the submissions by any of the developers that are trying to build wind farms. So I think the numbers that you're looking at are underestimates by quite a lot. I can't judge it any better than that because I don't have any data.
I'll put that point to Mr. Buchan. Some of the road loops failed and you don't have all the data.
Can I just check, Mr. Sandler, was that from Transport Scotland?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the traffic data that has been used within the assessment has come from the Department of Transport, which may be slightly different data sets. But the data that is quoted there is annual average daily traffic flows. It is not a snapshot. It is an averaged out to account for seasonality elements in it. I would also note that Transport Scotland has not objected to the baseline data, neither has the Highland Council in terms of its accuracy or its use within the study.
I would suggest that nobody knows the right answer, including the people who provided the data. I mean, I can't go any lower level than raw data. That's where I start from. I start at the very bottom level, and unless there's reporting information taken from somewhere that Traffic Scotland are not aware of on the road that they're responsible for, I don't know where else you go to look at the raw data. All I can tell you are the facts. So,
is there any response you want to give to that?
So I would just repeat that neither road authority have questioned the use of the baseline data, and as they are providing, collecting traffic statistics and data themselves, they would be aware of any issues with what is published in the report, which they have not done.
Is there any issue to be raised about road capacity?
I think I'd rather pass on to cumulative impact because I think it's more relevant.
Well, we'll do that. Set out 2 points there. So, I've set out a number of points on cumulative impact. The first point is about cumulative impact of abnormal loads. So the first point is about the way that the police operate. Does it mean that no deliveries for another project on a particular day? You said in your evidence that police will only allow convoys for one project at one time. Does that mean no deliveries for another project on a particular day, or no deliveries at all for another project until the first one project is complete?
Thank you, sir. They won't transport two projects at the same time. They will wait for one project to follow the other. The reason for that is that there's obviously a lot of on-site costs in terms of cranes and other bits and pieces waiting around. Unless there's a substantial and sustained delay with one project, then Police Scotland will allow one project to be undertaken and then for another to follow behind that for the abnormal loads.
And my second question was about there's no cumulative effect in terms, if you're saying there's no cumulative effect for loads happening, or deliveries happening for a development all at the same time, or a number of developments all at the same time, is there a sequential effect from continual deliveries over a long period?
The construction programs. So in the cumulative assessment that's been undertaken in the planning documents before you, they have assumed a scenario where all the peaks coincide one at a time. That won't happen in practice because sites are of different sizes, different construction programs and what have you. The grid connection dates and the construction programs and the discharge of planning conditions for projects and the size of the projects will all vary. So I don't believe there will be one abnormal load deliveries all done and then you'll be straight into the next. I think there would be some period between. What that is, I do not know at this point in time, sorry.
First thing I'd like to ask is, you've actually got two loads that could occur at one time. You've got Kyle of Lockhouse Jetty to the aerodrome, and you've got aerodrome to site. Would those be happening concurrently or sequentially?
They may occur on the same day, depends on police resourcing.
That would almost certainly cause absolute chaos. If I can expand on that a little bit, I think it's already been noted, all of our fuel, both fuel oil, petrol, and this sort of thing comes to the island by truck. So if they've got to get past two hold-ups, and what we're talking about at Kyle is it's not just one trip, it's a sequence of trips as quickly as they can get those components off the ship. So you could have convoys going backwards and forwards in that area through most of the day with not very big gaps in between because, they'd have to get the trucks back to the jetty from the airfield before they can load up again. So there's a gap there, but they won't want the ship sitting there for a long time because it's not earning money doing that, so the faster they can unload the ship, the faster is better.
We paid daily charges for it.
Do you want to respond?
The delivery periods would be detailed in the CTMP if that is a particular concern for the police and the road authorities and other interested parties, then those can be staggered.
Can Mr. Buchan confirm to me that the CTMP, when it's ready, is really a matter that's negotiated between his clients and the council and not a matter that the public has access to?
I think in the response there, the council is and has the ability, and forgive me, I'm not a town planner, but there is an opportunity, should they wish, to consult with other affected parties. But again, apologies, I'm not a town planner, Mr. Campbell, so I can't give you absolute assurance on that. I would defer to those more knowledgeable on that.
I wasn't asking for involvement, I just wondered if you were aware of the practice. But thank you, that's a helpful answer.
But I'm aware in certain situations in England where that has happened and in fact has been treated similar to almost to a planning application itself. But I'm not aware in Scotland, but I'm not qualified to comment for here, sorry.
I think we could maybe look at whether it could be conditioned in the conditions section. I would see it in the conditions and as they stand, but the provision of or approval of a cumulative plan, I don't know if that's possible if it involves other developers, but we could maybe look at that.
I'd like to describe a picture of what I'm seeing from the cumulative impact. The Sky reinforcement scheme is going to kick off first, and then these other projects are going to be targeted at the completion of that, so they've got so that they can actually connect to start generating power. At the same time, you've got a number of things happening at the same time as that. So it may only be one wind farm project proceeding with AILs at any one time. But you have all the other HGV traffic for the two substations, the work being carried out on the overhead line, There is a further power line that is being worked out now that goes from Dunvegan substation out to Glendale, which we haven't discussed. But this is a reinforcement for the Outer Hebrides, so it forms a loop. So it's not part of energy generation as such, as security, but there will be vehicles for that as well. If you look at the situation of moving vehicles from Kyle, in the process of moving from Kyle, they will actually go past the proposed Balfour Beatty site, which is opposite Guildford Airfield. That site is intended as a depot, both for components and for plant. So you've got this various conflicts of interest between a lot of HGVs with the AILs running on the roads at the same time. See, one of the points I was making before about space, it's not just about tourist traffic, it's about this increased number of HGVs, smaller projects, being in conflict with the AIL convoys.
To put some numbers on that, the calculation I did, excluding everything SSEN are doing, there are 71,000 HGV movements will be required by the plans that have been submitted so far. Incidentally, 842 AIL transits as well. I'm not sure whether the HGVs are return journeys or just individual one-way trips. So it might be double that.
Just in terms of that calculation that you've done, what have you taken into account?
That's purely taking the number of HGV movements in each of the Balmena, Glenunlish to Ben Scar, Ben Aketil, Ben Mehinot, and I haven't included SSEN because I haven't got numbers for it.
So is that sorry, if you turn your microphone off, is that taking the numbers from table 1119 in the EIA? Is that, or where have you taken the numbers from?
It will be from the relevant section in the EIA. I can't tell you exactly which one, but it is out of the EIAs.
So, Mr. Batten, do you want to respond on the competition of HGV traffic and AILs? Mr. Smith-Reeves.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I mean, we've covered the AIL traffic passing other vehicles. I would just say in terms of cumulative impact, again, going back to the CTMP, that is the correct place to look at that, because by then you will have an accurate picture of the projects that are consented. You have an idea of exactly when those projects are moving to see if there's any combination effects that could occur. You would have an accurate picture of there. You would also know the developers in more detail and their construction methodologies, and working in that CTMP environment, work out an appropriate mitigation plan.
There's a further phenomenon that could occur in this. When you look at the traffic data for Ben Aketil, the highest level of HGVs is in the 2 months before they start moving the AILs, because they're finishing constructing the bases for the turbines at that point. So you've got steel, concrete, all of this sort of thing going in. If each project is sequential, you'll find that you've got one set, the highest level of HGVs for the one project overlapping the AIL deliveries of another. If you take it in sequence, one wind farm after another. So if one of the wind farms could be putting its bases in at the same time as you're delivering AILs. This is what I'm trying to get across. But again, it's a timeline issue. You've got to see. What we can't predict at the moment is where these different projects are going to sit relevant to each other on a timeline that is somewhere in the construction of the overhead line. This suggests that this would need to be looked at by the government as what happens with a set of projects across that whole time span.
That's enough to start.
you, sir. I think one key point just to remember on this is not all construction projects have the same construction profile due to differences in terms of the size of the project, its complexity, the length of access tracks that you need to build to get to the turbine elements and other elements within the site. Not all of them have a peak of traffic immediately before abnormal loads, and this is why I think it's important when we are writing the CTMP report, is that you have the most up-to-date, accurate picture of when this site is going into production and others, so that you can get a highly accurate picture of traffic movements and where issues coincide.
I just want to make one point that I've seen with planning. When planning is given for a project, there isn't a start time stated. So there is a time in which that planning is valid before it runs out, but you could start at any time in that time span. There is no, as far as I can see, there is no control over that to determine when something should start and the acceptable span of that, especially when you have these multiple projects, because that is going to be part of determining the overlap.
But wouldn't a cumulative traffic management plan address that?
Only depending on the amount of data you've got at that point. You've got to have something that's continually looking at what is going on and updating. Yeah, and it may be that if you've got that, you're going to say to one wind farm development, no, you can't start at this point because you've got too much of an overlap with other projects, and it might not just be wind farms.
So if it helps, a CTMP is a live document and can be reactive to changes in the road network and changes in other projects coming online.
I don't know if we can take this point any further. We do have a couple more points to discuss, and it is now past 4 o'clock. Do the parties think that the further points will take much longer? There's a point about cumulative wear and tear, a point about the cumulative increase in HGV traffic, whether it should be treated as non-significant, and a point about the traffic management plan. Can we deal with that in, say, 10 minutes, or is that... Yeah, you think so? Okay. Well, we'll need to clear up quick after that. Okay. Right. So the next point was about cumulative increase in HGV traffic. It's shown in table which we've looked at in the EIR 1119. It is a very large increase. In some cases, just let me get hold of the table. Here it is. So I think in some cases it's been suggested in the EIR that the load on the actual number of HGVs on the road is quite low, and therefore the increase is non-significant. But there are cases where there are still quite a lot of HGVs on the road, and cumulatively there are some very large increases, such as 44% on the A863 between the B8009 and 87. Is that really something that should be treated as non-significant? A 44% increase, 792%, 49% increase of HGVs and 44% increase of total traffic. I'm sorry, I was looking at you, but
apologies, I was looking at my piece of paper here. I mean, in terms of the traffic numbers, the numbers have been reported there and have been reviewed by the road authorities who have not found an issue of how the significance has been assessed there. Just in terms of the wear and tear elements, which I think where you are also mentioning, sir, there have been similar instances where obviously the applicant wishes to enter into a Section 96 wear and tear agreement with the Highland Council and with Transport Scotland in terms of addressing the wear and tear elements of it there. in terms of cumulative effort elements of that, it is generally regarded as best practice that rather than just do a survey at the start and one at the end, that you do intermediate surveys and that the road condition can be effectively monitored. And there have been instances in East Ayrshire and Dumfries and Galloway where there have been projects operating in proximity to each other where they have found a way of attributing any abnormal wear and tear to the road network to the appropriate party by reviewing the condition surveys and then reviewing that against the construction profile of what's going on the network there. So that has been considered in other parts of the country.
And can that be set out in the cumulative traffic management plan, how that would be organised?
Yes, I think that would be the ideal place for it to be there, because then you would have the accurate construction programme from other projects and a monitoring regime to suit.
I think going back to what we were saying before about, I think a management plan is needed, but I think it needs to be a multi-project management plan. I think it needs to be a bigger vision. Just an illustration of what I was trying to say a little while back. If you go from Kyle to Old Corrie, which is where they're going to create the one of the substations, you've got entrances coming onto, or driveways coming onto that section of road at the airport, at the Balfour BT site for the overhead line. You've got traffic coming from Kyle Junction along that, from the Kyle Harbour coming along that section of road. When you get into Broadford, you're going to have a Sodexo workers' camp for building a substation, and then you've got the substation entrance itself. That one section of road is going to get inundated by various things, various pieces of transport trying to do various functions. So to look at one project in isolation doesn't tell the story, and it won't solve the problem.
Do you want to respond to that?
Again, so I think in the construction traffic management plan, the cumulative effects for other projects is the appropriate place to deal with that, because at that time you will have the information required to set out any appropriate mitigation that's required.
I think we've taken that point as far as we can. I don't know if
I think that one's over to you.
Is there anything you wanted to say about wear and tear and dealing with cumulative wear and tear, or?
I think that's going to be very difficult to judge what's caused what. So it's difficult to see how this becomes proportioned. I think that is necessary. It's looked at on a very regular basis and not allowed to deteriorate quickly, especially in winter, because any snow or icing situations we get will strip the road off because the ice will just pull it apart.
Okay. We'll move on to section 8, which is the traffic management plan. One question was, should I request a traffic management plan before reaching the recommendation? And the other was, what specific measures can be taken to mitigate significant effects arising from the increase in HGV traffic, if there were any, generated by the development in terms of driver severance and delay, community severance and delay, effects on vulnerable road users, and generation of dust and dirt. Mr. Rackham.
Thank you, sir. In terms of the various measures in the CTMP, there would be a variety of aspects that deal with the impacts that you've described there. There would also be traffic management key junctions, the agreement of HGV travel times. There's the whole abnormal load movement agreement there. There would be a public information and signage strategy developed within the CTMP, including advance warning signs. There would be a community liaison scheme and the ability for the public to report and advise of any issues that have resulted from construction traffic on the network. and obviously the access routes would be set and various measures to enforce and ensure that people did not divert onto other routes to shortcut access to the site. In terms of requesting one prior to determination, we believe a post-consent CTMP, as is the norm in other wind farm applications, would be a far more robust document because it would give you exact details at that time of which projects have been determined, what their accurate delivery programs are, what their start dates are, all of that information that we've discussed here today, and it would also allow us to bring into that further information and the results of detailed consultation with the police relating to abnormal load movements as well.
So in terms of community severance and delay, what specifically, how would any of those measures specifically help?
So in terms of severance and, well, I think you said driver severance and delay. So in terms of delay there, obviously improved information on when vehicle movements are occurring, prior information, the ability to liaise with the developer in terms of the community liaison aspects of, you're concerned about this, how that can then react to those concerns, and deal with that there.
I said community severance.
Oh, apologies. Sorry. In terms of community severance, then obviously information is key to advising people when to expect vehicle movements, so that people can be aware of the potential for a greater number of HEV movements in the area, and obviously improve signage and the management of key junctions to make sure that safety of pedestrians, other road users is within that. And there's a whole range of measures that I think are outlined in the very draft plan, but in terms of the finalised version, that will include other measures to address a number of the other concerns that you have there about, for example, dust and dirt, the sheeting over of bulk materials, the use of wheel washes on site to prevent the dirt and dust going onto the public road, and other elements there.
Mr. Smith?
I think the key to all that...
Sorry, you just turned your mic off, Mr. Smith.
Oh, sorry.
I think the key to all that is going to be a communication body that is not just representing the one project, but it is covering all the projects, because each project needs to know what the other is doing. It also comes down to making sure appropriate media is used. Facebook is something that's very popular on Sky, but there needs to be a website. There needs to be something people can look up daily. There needs to be some decent electronic signs out on the road so that people can see what's going on if they don't have those facilities. So it's a question. For me, I can't see who the body is to control this, because it doesn't appear to be one, apart from one company taking responsibility. It doesn't mean that they combine with all the other companies. So when there are so many projects going on, you need a consolidated point of information for all those projects. And, okay, the police have got to organise the AILs, but it's not really their job to provide all of this extra communication. On-road communication, yes, but I think it's very key that we use modern media to make sure people have got a daily update.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is, if I look at Highland Council, who's managing the cumulative traffic management plan? Or perhaps is it more a question for Mr. Bracken?
So it's our transport planning team. There's a lot of concern from our transport planning team regarding the cumulative effects and the requirement for a coordinated construction traffic management plan. Are you looking for a name for the officer, or is it?
No, not name, just who's managing it. Is it Highland Council?
Planning team. I think we would request Mr. Buchan's presence at the conditions session, whether that happens tomorrow or
if that's possible, so that we can go through the construction traffic management plan and any other traffic-related conditions, because they have been certainly been discussed today, so that would be very helpful. I don't know if I'm answering your question anymore.
That answers my direct question, is who's responsible for managing it? Because I understand Highland Council is responsible for managing the cumulative traffic management plan. Is that right? Or
I don't think it necessarily is. I think they will be reviewing and getting a reply. Transport Planning and Roads Operational Manager.
is the person responsible for the management plan?
That's who's responsible for overseeing the construction traffic management plans that we receive. Transport Planning and the Roads Operational Manager.
But there are matters for the condition that we would need to discuss further, which we can deal with in the conditions section. Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything further?
Or can I add it's also Transport Scotland, because if it affects the trunk roads as well.
So that's likely to be the network manager for the 87.
Does that deal with the issue? Mr. Smith, is there anything else you want to say further on that?
I think I just wanted to say one last thing. We can't stress how important the A87 is to the island, for the island's communities. So any disruption is critical. And Faye will go into the economics of that when she gets a chance. It's also necessary to stress, it's also key to the communities of the Outer Isles as well as Rasay. So it's not just about this island, it's about further than this island. And if that structure gets broken down for any reason, we're in real trouble.
Because of the ferry network.
Yeah, because the link to the Outer Isles is obviously at the Uig ferry.
And it's the practice to give the applicant the last word. So, Mr. Buchan, is there anything you want to say to wrap up, to respond to that?
Yes, no, I will not delay the, I believe it's the juniors dancing team.
Yes, I believe so. So, well, thank you very much, everyone, for this session. It's been extremely helpful, and a long session, but useful, I think. So we'll need to back up quick now.